My name is Krista Simon, and I lead our rapid research team here at Figma. And I am so excited to close out room 205 today with all of you in person. It is incredible to be here with all of you, and this is, fun fact, my third config I got to host. So it's not staring at a blank screen, it's staring into all of you wonderful humans. So I'm so grateful for all of you being here with us today. I love actually being able to see faces. I've noticed participants that I've talked to in the last 3 years of research sessions, so it's such a joy to have you all here. And I also hear, not just in person, we have over 50 cities of a Friends of Figma watch parties happening all over the world, so it's pretty incredible. And of course, I'm never not researching, so I have a quick poll question for you all. So by show of hands, I know, very scientific of me, who here, I love the early hand, who here has used or uses Slack currently in their work? Geez, even more than I expected, pretty much everyone in this room. Well, today, you get quite the delight. You get to hear from someone who played a foundational role in actually building it, Tamar Yehoshua. After 4 years as the Chief Product Officer at Slack, Tamar recently joined IVP as a venture partner. We are thrilled to have Tamar joining our stage today and with our very own VP of Design, Noah Levin, for a conversation that will touch on all the ways building product has changed over the years, from the importance of rapid iteration and testing and a culture of prototyping to balancing customer needs with the importance to innovate. And especially in this wonderful age of AI, it's so critical. These are legit all of my favorite pieces and parts of our product process, so I'm very excited and will be tuning in quite greatly backstage. And I am secretly hoping Noah might break out into a little song here, in case you didn't know he has an amazing voice. So with that, please help me in warm welcoming Tamar Yehoshua and Noah Levin to the stage.
Hello, everybody. Wow, this is awesome. It is so good to see so many wonderful faces. How are we doing? Are we having a good day so far? Great, good. So this, I believe, is the last session for the day before the final session downstairs at 4 p.m., and we're super, super excited to be here. This is a treat for me. So Tamar and I, believe it or not, actually used to work together a long time ago. I think I was just out of college, so this was like 2010, 2011 or something at Google, and so it's really cool to be with you on stage.
It is such a treat. I do remember Noah as a fresh new grad, new designer on the team, and from the very beginning we knew that he was destined for greatness.
I don't know about that, but I'm hanging in there. I'm trying. So I thought I would start with like a couple light questions just to get started, and then we'll get into the kind of meaty topics around product management and design, things like that. So the first one, I feel like I'm like a game show host with these cards. I feel very, if you weren't in tech, what career might you be in?
I think I would be a behavioral scientist.
What is that? Sounds cool.
I'm just fascinated by human nature and the study of human nature, and all the books like Kahneman and Tversky, and all of the studies about how people think and how people act.
That's a great answer also. Like, I feel like you could have been a designer too. Like, there's so much overlap between, yes, how people work and studying them and software as well. So second lightning round question. What is actually first, how many of you are from outside of San Francisco here today?
Oh, wow.
That's amazing, like half of you at
lot.
least. What's one recommendation you have for those lovely people?
So if you're staying for the weekend, on Saturday there's a great farmers market at the Ferry Building. I love to go to the farmers market and then afterwards go for dim sum at Harborview, which is across the street. Great combination. And if you're not staying for the weekend, still go to the Ferry Building, have some Blue Bottle, and buy some dandelion chocolate.
That's a good one. It's walkable from here too. I feel like that's a nice San Francisco spot. Just one more and then we'll get into it, I promise. What is your favorite Slack feature?
I love all my Slack features, but I think the thing that I love the best is the emoji reactions. It's so simple, but it changes a culture of a company. And when you used email back in those days. At work, would you ever have imagined that you would be sending hearts to people at work? And so Slack enables you to do that. And one thing that I love is during the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was really stressed out, one of the research scientists at Slack did a study of the emoji reactions that we used at Slack, the company, and saw that the use of the heart emoji had skyrocketed since the beginning of the pandemic. And it just shows how much empathy there was within the company, and I love that.
That's awesome. I actually remember there's a feature, I think, in Slack where it shows you the most commonly used reactions you've used or something like that. And I remember on the design team at Figma, we sent screenshots of our most commonly used ones and stuff like that. Have any of you ever made a custom emoji? I feel like there's a room of designers, so I feel like we'll see.
Oh my God, that is not enough.
Yeah, there was
okay,
5
a
hands.
few more.
There's definitely more.
Okay, you were just shy. That's
Yeah.
good. Okay.
I feel like it'd be cool to get a little window into different companies and how they use these things and the kinds of character they put into it.
Totally.
Okay, so we're going to get into the meat of the conversation, which is really about product development. I mean, we could definitely spend the whole time on emojis and reactions. I could, at least. That'd be a lot of fun, but we're not going to do that. So let's start with just thinking about, you've worked at so many companies. You've worked at Amazon, Google, Slack, and now in venture capital. You've seen a lot of changes in how product development works. Tell us a bit about how it's changed over the years and kind of where we are today.
It's gotten a lot faster. So in the beginning, we would have the waterfall. Probably many of you don't even remember when we used a waterfall model. You'd have to write out all your requirements up front. There would be 2 or 3 releases a year. And especially when I worked at Intel before all those and you were dealing with hardware. But it's just gotten so much faster. You went from releasing a couple times a year to releasing multiple times a week to releasing multiple times a day. And with that, all of our processes had to change. And that was slower. We started releasing more rapidly without updating our processes. And that, I think, has now started to catch up. And the tools have gotten better. Developers can develop faster because they have more libraries that are reusable, more components that are reusable, better frameworks. And it's so interesting how that has changed over the years and how we engage people within the company has changed. So I would say at a high level, everything runs faster, which has pros and cons. More pros, in my opinion, than cons, but the con is it can get kind of chaotic.
Yeah, you mentioned we're going from release cycles of yearly to monthly to almost daily. That's pretty difficult sometimes to keep up with. How do you think about balancing, optimizing for kind of speed and getting something to be first to market, and how do you know when to balance that with taking your time in a project or?
It's especially consumer versus enterprise is different. And at Slack, we were an enterprise company, but we had a consumer ethos, and most of the PMs and the designers came from the consumer world. And so you want to push really fast, but you experiment. So you iterate and you experiment. If people didn't catch Ethan Eisman's talk about an hour ago, he gave a talk on the product principles at Slack. It's a great talk. I really suggest that you go and listen to it if you missed it, talking about the principles we use. And one was prototype the path. So if you want to develop faster, to your question, how do you balance that? How do you know that the quality is high enough? You have to prototype, you have to iterate, you have to try it internally, you have to give it to customers, and you can't know when it's ready. There is no optimal time, but you have to keep testing it out. Either you're testing it like at Google, you have enough users that you can do experiments on everything, or you test it and you iterate with a small set of customers. And a lot of this is not science. A lot of it is you have to have a gut instinct of this is going to solve more problems than it causes. And one of the mistakes that I see a lot of product managers making is they over-index on the people who are going to be unhappy because something launches, when something new is going to make a lot more people happy, but they're only going to be happy and they're not going to complain. And there's going to be this small set of people who complain, and you don't like doing things that make people unhappy. But if you zoom out and you say, this is going to fix more problems than it solves, you have to be very rational about that. And it's very, very difficult to do in the face of especially a company like Figma, a company like Slack that has so many users. The users are very vocal.
Yeah, it's a good one because I feel like especially in today's society we spend a lot of time probably focusing on things that on Twitter that you're seeing or negative reactions, and it's hard to kind of reorient. Have you seen moments like that where everyone was focused on some negative change aversion moment or whatever it might be for Slack, and you either had to reorient the team to that positive thing or they did it naturally? What comes to mind?
So change management is really important in how you do that and how you educate people. We did, a couple years ago when we redid the UI of Slack, we spent a lot of time on the new UI, and then when we rolled it out, we helped people along. So we had one release where we did that, not as successfully, and we broke some flows for people that we actually weren't aware of, and we got a lot of complaints. That was with our WYSIWYG, the first WYSIWYG release, and we fixed it all, but we should have been more attuned to that, and we would have done a better job if we had rolled it out to a small set of people, gotten their feedback first and incorporated it, which we then did with the new information architecture. And we really tried to give it to a small set, diverse set of population of users, incorporate that feedback, and then have lots of toasts on the way of, here, this is what's new, this changed here. You can't just spring it on people, especially enterprise customers. Enterprise customers get very upset because sometimes you have a company that may have tens of thousands of people. You have a small IT team of 4 or 5 people who are managing the release of the software. All of a sudden you put this new release out and they get all these complaints from the people in their company coming to them and they don't know how to answer it. So with enterprise customers, you have to really manage the change management. I would say that all the consumer PMs that were at Slack did not appreciate that in the beginning. But now we do.
Yeah, I mean, just out of curiosity, how many of you work on a consumer-oriented product, or you at least think of the product you work on in that direction? Just nice to know kind of the spread a little bit. Okay, and then how many of you would you say that you are focused on an enterprise kind of need or an enterprise kind of, wow, pretty even split?
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me more about some of those differences. Like you mentioned, a good one is there is this big sense of change aversion if they're used to this tool that they're relying on to whether it's in Slack, send a critical message to their boss or whatever it is. What else did you have to do at Slack to kind of account for those intense needs they have sometimes?
We wanted to balance innovation and moving fast with helping our customers absorb new features. So we didn't want to just stop and say we're going to release once or twice a year. Some of our big customers wanted us to do that, and we just said no. But we got much better at working with them, giving them a sandbox, letting them have advance notice about the feature, using feature flags, letting the customer support or their customer success managers work with the large customers so that they could tell us when they wanted to turn it on. Very importantly, we gave them a window that it would just go live after that window. It was not an infinite amount of time. It was usually around 3 months, and we just turned it on at the end of that because we didn't want all of these code streams live at the same time. That was just too much to manage. We only did it for our large customers, not all of our customers, but appreciating that their job is hard. You have to put yourself in their shoes and understand all these complaints they're going to be getting and how do you help them. So once we started doing that, having the release trains, I mean, it sounds so obvious to all of you enterprise people here. Of course you need to do this, but we wanted to move fast, and then the complaints were, you're going to slow us down if you make us do this. Well, there's a balance. And the enterprise customers also want to see innovation, and they also want to see new features, and their end users want to see it. It's the admins who push back.
Yeah, it's super interesting, the contrast between surprising a giant company with a feature versus having them be a part of it. And even if it were the same exact feature, to some extent it can be received very differently if they're collaborating with you. And ideally, it's more than just that they actually are evolving the feature. Had that ever happened where a customer or an enterprise company actually shifted the feature itself in a pretty big way throughout that beta period?
The thing that I love that we do now, which we didn't used to do, was how we involve customers in the process. I mean, 10, 20 years ago, it was very much a black box to customers. But now, with your iterating, your prototypes, we give our prototypes, I still say we and Slack gives the prototypes to customers. So Slack would have Slack Connect channels with our customers. So let's say we're working on a new release like Huddles. There'll be a Slack Connect channel with some of our customers who are co-developing it with us. And we would put prototypes into Slack Connect with our customers. And then in that Slack Connect channel, you have engineers, you have designers, you have product managers responding to the customers. There's no way to get empathy from your team than to be in a Slack, no better way than to be in a Slack Connect channel with your customers as they're seeing these new products. And there was one release that we had where we had some of our champions from our customers in the Slack Connect channel with us. And they really do co-develop. They say, well, what if you change the color here? What if you change the box over there? Or we really need this feature. And then when we launched the feature, one of these champions tweeted, see that box over there? That was because of me. And it was so wonderful to have your customers feeling that kind of ownership. And then that breeds so much customer love.
Yeah, I feel like when I think about my interactions with software over the years, like I never really felt that connection with companies for a long time. And it is a very different feeling when you actually see the person behind the work or you're going back and forth with them. There have been a number of times working at Figma where, when we get feature requests, sometimes it's actually like a prototype or a complete design end-to-end of like, here's what you should do. Yeah, it's the kind of amazing thing of having a design customer base is they will actually like, they not just tell you what the problem is, but here's how you should, and a lot of times they're really good.
And what do you do with those?
I mean, sometimes we'll build them if it's the right thing to do and if we can and if it's in the right flow. And like you said, I mean, one of the reasons we always try to prioritize some of those requests is, one, because they're usually important needs that we might not have seen or caught, but two, it does build that relationship with the customer base. It does make people feel involved. There was one where there was a video from someone named Jacob who on Twitter sent this kind of a joke TikTok-like video about the pencil tool. He said, Figma doesn't have a pencil tool. This is ridiculous, like, as a total kind of joke, but also somewhat serious. And at the time, Evan, one of the early co-founders of Figma, built it in a weekend, which is unheard of, but then released it as like a joke response, and he's like, actually go check again. And then the person checked, and funny enough, that pencil tool is still the same pencil tool that we have today. There have been a number of features, so send us all the ideas and requests. So anyway, I'm sure that this happens a lot when you have an excited customer base too.
That is so wonderful, and I think one of the evolutions also, when you start developing software like Slack and probably like Figma, you're developing for yourself. And you think that you understand the customer, so you don't need to talk to customers because I use Slack every day, all day. Why do I need to get input from other customers? And then you realize as time evolves that you're actually very different from the customer because you're an expert power user, you know everything. And there are people in different countries, there are people at different size companies in different verticals that are using it in different ways. So I think there was an evolution for the company Slack to realize that we had to hear from a more diverse set of customers, and we had to put ourselves into their shoes. I was listening to a part of the keynote this morning, and I heard the Stripe CTO and head of design talking about this, and we did the same thing. We called them complaint storms. And a complaint storm was a team would get into a room and pretend like they were a certain type of customer. Wow. So there was like a whole scenario. You just went to a barbecue and a friend of yours told you about this tool called Slack, and you have no idea what it is, and you landed on the homepage. And then you go through each step and you're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. How would I know that I need to do that there? Or whatever part of the flow it was. And that really, again, helps you empathize. Empathy with your customers is so important. And I think if you all should be really doing that in a regular cadence of putting yourself in your customer's shoes who don't understand your product, who are not expert users. So we had a whole set of objectives going back to beginning users who don't know what Slack is and don't understand it, and how can we give them more onboarding and more help to get to them to the expert. We had to tell engineers, like, you know that feature you really want because you're an expert user, you just can't build it right now.
Yeah, it's definitely super important to kind of ground a lot of conversations in real feedback. And I feel like there are also times where we'll end up creating really like, kind of detailed frameworks of what we believe is happening in the world with our customers, or segment them into groups of some kind. And you can definitely do that to some amount of success. It's better than not talking about customers at all, but there's almost no replacement than for just talking to people or talking to customers directly and getting that feedback. So that's a good one.
We had OKRs around designers, product managers, and engineers meeting with customers.
Oh, whoa.
That you gotta get in front of the customer. because it just so, as a company gets bigger, your support teams do it, or your executives. Like I was constantly talking to the more the C-level and the admin customers, not the end users. So how do you make sure? It wasn't always successful. I'm not sure everybody actually did it, but the intention was there.
That's cool. I saw something similar. I used to work at a company called ClassPass, and I was living in New York, and they had every employee, and it was a smaller company, so they could probably pull it off at the time, go through a customer support rotation, and you would spend like a full day, and it was so enlightening. And just to get, because there's lots of different kinds of ways of interacting. There's conferences and talking to people in person, but it's sort of a different feeling to get the rigor of someone who is going to like a little help bubble somewhere and like wants to go out of their way in their day to express a frustration they're having, and you kind of have almost like a different level of sentiment in those interactions that are good to have. But it's hard to scale that. Like you mentioned mixed success. Like, yeah, how do you get people to actually do it or just talk to people?
You need to get the customer support teams aligned with you so that they will invite the product managers. Like we had an enterprise team of PMs and they were constantly meeting with customers. But then the people who are more the consumer PMs on the core weren't meeting as much. So we actually trained them. We went through the enterprise PMs, did a whole training for the other PMs on this is how you present the roadmap to our enterprise customers so that everyone felt more comfortable with it. We had trainings around how to do user research so that more PMs could do it. So what I learned is you can't just throw somebody into the deep end and say, go meet with customers. You're not going to get enough value. You have to decide how they should be meeting, what they need in order to make those meetings successful, and then the other side needs to pull them in. So we would have we had Slack channels where a customer support person could put in a request and say, I have this customer who wants to learn about this, and then all the PMs would be in that channel and like what PM would volunteer to be.
Yeah, that's actually, I want to learn more about that. Like when you have this huge funnel of feedback and it comes from so many places, how did people like navigate that funnel? Was it mostly that channel where everyone would funnel? Was it like the channels that were specific to that feature that people were talking about? Yeah, how do you keep that fire hose going? And
so no, it was not that channel.
Okay.
That was more just for like meeting with customers. There were a couple of different ways that we did that, and it also evolved over the years. In the beginning, we had SKL channels. So when there was an issue from a customer, there was an SKL channel for each team, and then the engineers would be in there, the PMs would be in there. As the company got bigger, that like just broke.
Was that just for urgent issues or all kinds of issues?
Well, in theory, but then it started getting used for all kinds of things. And then our engineering, one of the engineering leaders who now is at Figma, Marcel, was one of the engineering directors. Marcel, I don't know if you're out there, but who came to us and like, our team is spending way too much time on SKL. And it's just people, because the culture was so, it was so ingrained that you help the customer. So if something came in an SKL channel, engineers would just drop everything and go fix it. But that's not always the right thing to do. You need prioritization, and then they started being too many issues coming through. So we did an assessment of what percentage of the engineers' time were being spent in these SKL channels. We're like, whoa, we have a problem here. So what we did is we created a role in customer support called product specialists, and we started with one. We also always, we iterate our processes as well as in our product. And we had a product specialist who started in one team, and they would triage. And the product specialist would know that area, would look at all the support tickets, would understand the prioritization, and then would send it over to the engineers in a different channel, so they weren't getting the immediate SKL. It was so successful. It took down the percentage of time engineers were spending. It was more spread. They were able to resolve some of the issues that customer support wasn't able to, but they were more specialists. Wow. They were usually graduated customer support people, like the best in customer support. It was a nice path of promotion for them, of something more interesting, because they would then sit with the product team. Wow. So it was like a win all around. So we did in one team, the next quarter we added another, and then we added another, until each of our major pillars had a product specialist.
Wow.
So those were for the kind of SKL, and it worked really well. And then on the enterprise team, we also had product gaps analysis, and that was more from the field, from salespeople and support people, like here's a gap in the product, and not in a scale. And there was somebody in the sales ops team who would manage that for us. And each area would show here are the gaps and how much pipeline was associated with that gap. Wow. So we would actually prioritize by the pipeline of what features. Those were usually bigger features, like meaty features, like enterprise key encryption, like you need to do this, and this is what it's going to unlock. And then we had quarterly meetings with the sales team and with our product leads and manage the product gaps process. Once we got a person from the sales ops team to drive it, as opposed to everyone just throwing things in, again, it got much more organized.
How did they discern? One thing I think we struggle with too sometimes in Figma is discerning the difference between like a feature request that's very specific and it sort of can be clustered and talked about in that way versus like some kind of other ambiguous problem. Like how did that roll, or how did anyone navigate the, when that was a clue? It wasn't like that we needed to build that feature. It was more just that there was this other thing we should have talked about, or was it mostly features?
Well, that's what a product manager should do. And that's is very much the definition of a product manager is don't just do what people ask for, but do what they actually really need. So I wouldn't expect the people reporting the issues to bring it to us like that. I would expect them to bring us the features. And then if it's unclear or you're not sure, one, you wait till there are multiple customers asking for the same things to make sure you understand it. And then the product manager needs to spend time with the customer to understand really what the issue is. And we had some really fabulous enterprise PMs who had worked with enterprises in previous companies, and they could very easily say, they're asking for this, but they don't really need it. They're going to be fine without it. But one thing that we also got really good at doing is not doing what they asked for, but giving immediately, but telling them when in the future. So people like to know that you're listening, and if you say, I'm not going to get to this because I have these other priorities that you're also asking for. And here's what they are. Like transparency is like trumps everything. And then say, well, in 3 quarters, I'm going to get to this. And then you have to do it. But it really is okay, even if somebody's like pounding the table and saying, I need this now. You'd be amazed how many times you can say, I'm going to do this in 3 quarters or next year. And they'll be like, okay. And it's that, again, it's transparency. You say like how many resources you have, why something else is more important. Not everybody will agree with you that it's more important, but it's the same way, like the way you deal with your team of being transparent about why you're prioritizing one thing over another. Do the same with your customers.
Yep. How do you, so sometimes you're gonna, you'll have this clear set of things, like you said, and you can even sort of sequence them over time and let people know when one is coming later. How do you think about, there are probably also things those customers aren't asking, but you have this, belief as a company, or you have this instinct that you still want to try it or expand into a different area. How do you balance those two things? Like the direct customer asks day to day that is pretty clear and specific, and you need to march your way there, but then the whole, famous Henry Ford quote around like faster horses or whatever. Like how do you know when to go the other way?
I feel like this is the question I get the most from product managers and from product organizations, balancing innovation and customer asks. And I know it's a simplistic answer, but the answer is you have to do both. And you just do. You have to have you have to be responding to customer needs. If your customers love your product and the customer love is here, and you keep the product here, they're not gonna love it anymore. Like they expect here and then here. Like the bar is constantly raising. So you have to be responding to your customers and doing what they need, but you can't only be doing that. So you have to save some room to thinking beyond, because as I said, as we started, is everything is moving so quickly, and your competitors are moving quickly, and your customer expectations are moving quickly. And if you're not pushing the boundary on something, then you're gonna get behind really, really fast. But balancing innovation and customer needs, it's not about the number of people you have working on things. It's about what you're doing and how you're doing it. How are you prototyping some new ideas? How are you keeping new energy? How are you getting people excited in your organization about doing new things? If people see that there's new stuff happening in your org, maybe they're not working on it this quarter, but they'll be working on it next quarter, they get excited about doing new things because you are innovating as an organization. So you have to keep pushing that. while you're doing the customer needs.
Yeah, like I feel like I've seen and heard about different models for this balance, and some companies, they'll have like a dedicated innovation team, and it'll be sort of just that team's responsibility to look 5 years out. And there's probably a world where like actually that's a pretty effective strategy if it was the only way to get it done. How do you see the difference between empowering the whole organization to be doing that kind of work versus like, yeah, just one specialist team, or at least how did it happen at Slack?
It's a very hard thing to balance, and everybody wants to be on the innovation team. And so it's you also want to rotate it. I think what you do is you have, each team should be able to innovate in whatever their area. They should have a license to innovate, and each team should be doing something that they feel like is innovative in their area. And then the things that are stepping forward, it almost depends. It's more who and not the structure. Is this the right personality? Is it somebody who's going to prototype? Is it somebody who's going to be thinking forward? So you start with a really small seed with some structure. I don't believe in here's a team and you say go forth and innovate. Like that, I don't think works. You need a box and saying these are the things that are most important to us. Within this, how do you think you can push the envelope? And you give that assignment to that team. And then the next quarter it might be a different team, because it might be a different area, and you might need different expertise. So you don't want the people who aren't in the innovation team to feel like they can't innovate. So that's what I would do, is small teams that actually rotate, so different people can then move. I also believe in flexibility of teams, so people can rotate around, and you can say, well, this is more important this quarter, we're going to put more people here. Or this person wants to work on this now, let's move them over there, because people they get more energy around getting to do new things.
Yeah, definitely. Like you want to build a culture that lasts and get people who can work there for a long time and do a lot of interesting stuff. And if they believe that you can jump to different challenges, that helps. I feel like another thing that we found some luck with at Figma, I know a lot of companies, probably most companies at this point, have some kind of like hackathon. I mean, I'm going to pull you again just because it's fun. How many of you have done like a hackathon at your company in some way, or like a maker week or whatever you call it? So actually, that's kind of cool. Like almost most of you.
Almost everyone.
And how many of you like genuinely enjoy them? And like almost the same number of hands. They're amazing. Like they're so great. We do them twice a year at Figma for a full week. And I can't tell you how much energy it gives people to have, rather than it feel like it's a single team's responsibility to think bigger. You've got now the entire company doing that but just maybe an abbreviated point of time. But I feel like, I don't know exactly how many, but a good amount of features we work on, it wasn't just that they were born exactly at that time. Usually these are things that people have been thinking about for a bit, but it gave them the time to express it visually, and that, as we know as designers, is a really powerful tool to move an idea forward. So it's definitely a good...
We would actually track how many things launched.
Oh, yeah?
So we had demo days, we called them demo days twice a year, and we would look at how many things from the previous demo days actually made it to production. And this is super motivating for people.
And it's also it's cool to see how many of you raise your hand both times, like that it's, you like it. It's like we want our jobs to feel like that all the time as much as possible, that we feel that creative. And hopefully, like as leaders, we can create cultures where you still kind of have that energy of like just throwing things out, experimenting and trying new things.
On the other end of the spectrum, so we had the hackathons, demo days, which were for the innovation and forward thinking, and on the customer needs, we also did customer love sprints.
Oh, what's that?
And so we actually sometimes, I started them at Google. I remember we called them something different there. Maybe you remember. It would be
like a bug fix-it thing?
Yeah, we would have bug bashes, like a consolidated bug bash. But at Slack, we took a different twist, and so that list of friction that customers have, that they're not big enough to be a feature and to make it onto a roadmap, but they're too big for a bug fix to just an engineer to just go in and fix it. So we started with one team, again, start small. The messaging team had a customer love sprint for a week, and what made it successful was that product managers and designers prioritized the issues and spec them, so then engineers could just pull them off the sheet and say, oh, I want to work on this. We didn't care what people worked on, And then they said, I want to work on this, and they had to be able to ship it within that time, like complete it. And it was so successful that they started doing it once a quarter, and most of the other teams in the org. We didn't mandate it. It was like a bottoms-up thing. If you want to do it, your team wants to do it, depending on what your priorities are. But that was a way that you keep maintaining customer love. And the engineers loved it, because these are things that would bother people, and they wanted to get them fixed. So you gave them an opportunity, because nothing's worse than being in a product organization and feeling like your product sucks. And like, you hate that. You want to go in and fix things. So give people the time and the space to fix it.
Yeah, I feel like, as you said that, I'm like, the curse of being a designer is I think you always think your product sucks, even if other people don't. You know, we're driven to want to make these things better. That's cool. I mean, we've also experimented with some quality week kinds of things. I think we call them quality weeks, and I think we don't usually do it like the whole company at the same time. It actually helps to have them, like you mentioned, rotated to different groups, or just that way you have a diversity of kind of work happening. But I've always been blown away with the like amazing reception when you fix those things, and that in itself is this really good motivating cycle where we'll do these launches. Maybe you've seen them of like 40 big, little big launches. I forget what we call them sometimes, but it'll be just a long list of things that maybe only took a few days or a week to fix. But usually like that gets more, excitement from our customers than sometimes even the biggest launches we do. And so it's a good reminder that like a lot of times, depending on the tool, of course, you work in. For Figma, if you're relying on this tool, that those details matter more. But either way, it's a good thing to hear that you can balance that type of work. So we've got 9 minutes left, and I'm not going to go to questions yet, but I want you all to think about questions, because in about 3 minutes, we will ask if you have any, and then I believe there's microphones on either side. So maybe start thinking now, and I'll give us one more question before we jump to that. So just, queue up ideas, at least a few of you. So let's throw in something different. So you've moved on from Slack now. You are in the VC world. Tell us about that. What either like led to this, or what's it like? Anything you want to share about this new experience?
I like learning new things. So being a VC is totally different than building a product. But what's wonderful is you get to meet with people who are so passionate and so excited about what they're doing. You're meeting with founders all day, which I absolutely love. And with everything that's going on right now with the technology shift to AI, it's a really exciting time. And I know that everybody's heard that. It's like there's been so many posts about it. But like, there was crypto, there was Web3. Apologies for people who were really excited by that. I wasn't. I just felt like I really like being anchored on a customer problem, a user problem. And I feel like we've seen ML and AI work for, at Google for a long time. It was integrated into everything that we did. And the customer problems that you can solve with the advances in technology are so exciting to me. So I think it's a great time to be meeting with new companies, to be seeing what you can do, the possibilities of how we can be more productive, how we can make our jobs better. I'm very excited to hear your talk tomorrow and to see what Figma is going to be launching, because I don't have any spoilers. I don't know, but I want to find out.
Yeah, please come. That's a great plug. Thank you. Tomorrow, I'll be kicking the day off at 9 a.m. with a bunch of exciting kind of conversation starters about AI and some ideas that we've been kicking around. Okay, so are there any questions? And of course, I've got backup if we need, but I don't know, it's nice to participate a little bit. Oh, we've got some hand raises. I don't know where the microphone is.
The mic's right there.
Somewhere over there. So I think, unfortunately, you'll have to walk to it. Sorry, but if you feel comfortable
you can
doing
go to the
please
mic.
Just walk your way there, and you can queue up if you need to, and we'll do our best to get through however many we can in about 7 or 8 minutes.
Hi, is it on? Okay. You mentioned the vocal minority who are really upset. How do you find the feedback from the people who are actually happy about the changes and surface that?
It's a really good question. So one, let me just say about the vocal minority who are upset, you should reach out to them, and you should talk to them, and you should engage with them. Like, the worst thing you can do is just let it lie, right? And Slack is very lucky because we have a very active community, and people tweet. We had a channel that put all of the tweets into 2 different channels. One were love tweets, and one were beef tweets. So we saw all the feedback. So you want to have some kind of community that you engage with. However you do that, if it's a Slack community, if it's a Discord community, but you have to cultivate that community. It's not going to happen on its own. So get somebody in your marketing team, in your DevRel team, or a passionate engineer or product manager to cultivate the community, bring the champions together, and they will tweet about it. They will be public about it if you give them like the encouragement. And so we spend a lot of time with our communities, and that really, I think it really helps. Google is really good at doing that too.
Yeah, it's a great question. Another question?
Hi, thank you first off for having this talk. It's been really insightful. Second off, as someone who comes from a psychology, behavioral science background, and someone who really loves entrepreneurship and innovation and understanding what customers need and finding out what customers will need, how do you guys go about garnering innovation before the customer thinks of it?
So you have to understand your customers' pain points, and you have to, I'm a big fan of jobs to be done. You need to go in and see where is the friction, because they're not going to come up with saying, oh, we need to solve this problem. So like, nobody came to us for huddles. Everyone was like, you need to add video into your product, like Teams and Zoom. And we're like, but Teams and Zoom, like, it works for video. Like, why are we going to do that? But we felt like there wasn't, with everyone working remotely, there wasn't a way to have spontaneous conversations that you could have in the kitchen if you saw someone in the hallway. So we knew we wanted to solve the problem in a different way, and we understood that that was a problem that all of our customers were facing. So the only thing is spending time with them, understanding their day and asking questions in the right way that pulls out what are the biggest friction points that they have that you can solve in a different way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great one too. And I feel like building on it, you almost need a culture that invites people to bring up these ideas proactively, or that just isn't only able to respond to customers, and however that's done, whether it's through the Maker Weeks, whether it's through being like the yes and person in a room that's getting those ideas forward. That's a good one. Another question, great.
Hi, I'm also a psychology student.
Nice.
I love it.
It sounds like a big thing in your conversation is the importance of user research, understanding user needs. It seems like on an industry level, they're being targeted by layoffs. So I'm kind of curious, how do you get that buy-in for user research when it seems like that's the first to go when times are tough?
I think that's very sad that they are being targeted, and I think in some organizations there isn't a realization of the value. And you have to think of your organization and how do you show the value of user research. Our user research team was started very early in the Slack days. We hired a head of user research like way before I joined. And so it was ingrained into how we did things, and they actually brought insights that changed the direction of the roadmap. And so doing user research isn't enough, but you have to be able to translate it into the product organization and make sure there's a sponsor. So one of the things that I always did with user research is there had to be a product sponsor. Because if they did user research and then published it and then you never heard from it again, then it's like a tree falls in the forest, nobody heard it, did it fall? Like you want to make sure that there is a sponsor and it's going to be used and it's going to change the product. So if you can point to examples where the research actually impacted the product and changed it, then people are going to be much less likely to cut it. I also will say that some organizations overhired. Like there's some, we didn't have like a one-to-one. We were very select on user research, where we used it, so it was high leverage. Not every team had a user researcher. It was only the areas where we thought it would be the most impactful. So you have to be very strategic about it, but I'm a huge, huge believer in it. The Slack, during the days of the pandemic, we had something called the Future Forum, which was all based on user research from our user research team in the product org.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested in talking more about it, we have an amazing research booth with our researchers. Figma has 20 amazing researchers that are really great to talk to about this and where the industry's going. We love, as a company that builds tools for people, to like be a part of the conversation of the future of our work and the way that we work. So that's a great one to keep talking about, and a really good question.
Thank you.
We have time for one or two more. We'll see.
Hey, how are you? Thanks. These approaches and ideas, they're great that you've championed, and I'll put this to both of you, really. and also the energizing aspect of the people that are into this, that when you introduce these to the culture and the process, how have you dealt with this certain contingent of either obstinate or resistant folks within an organization who just want to do things the way they're used to, or are afraid of these kind of changes?
Oh, that's such a good question. You can't make everyone happy. And yeah, that was something that took me a long time to really accept. Like, I knew it intellectually, but as a leader, you want everyone to like you. And then you realize that if you haven't made some enemies, you probably haven't done the right thing. So it's okay. It's okay if people leave because they don't like the way the culture is going. It's better if people aren't aligned to the culture that they leave, and that's okay. But it's not okay if you haven't set the culture. Like, you have to understand what your culture is and why it's important, and you have to be able to communicate that effectively so that people understand, and spend some time with the naysayers, because they might have some points that you don't realize. Like, don't be afraid of them. If you're a leader, go set up a one-on-one with somebody who's complaining in Slack or complaining back channel. It's amazing how different people are one-on-one. And they will then tell you things that you didn't really realize, and you might change how you're talking about it. You might alter, like, it just hurt your communication. Maybe you were on the same page, but you didn't know it. So it's an investment. And I recommend, there's a book that was recommended to me many times called Switch, Dan and Chip Heath. It's about changing behavior in organizations, and it gives very clear tips on how do you change behaviors. And I read it and I live by it, and it's a wonderful book.
Amazing. Thank you. Beautiful answer. And literally today I wrote to one of my designers, not everyone's going to be happy. It's okay.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for listening, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar, as well.